Hi, this is Ed Cohen, your broadcast host today on Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast of globalbusinessnews.net. Our special guest today is Mr. Stephen Howard, and he is a consultant, very well-known consultant in leadership. His group is called Caliente Leadership, and he's based in Palm Springs, California. I'm here today in San Diego, California. So he's got a new book out, and it's called well, he'll tell you more about it than me, but it's all about better decision making and CEOs learning to be essentially first responders as we go into what I call the new now. So let's say hello and welcome, Stephen Howard.
Thank you, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Nice to see you. So tell us about I'm going to put you on big screen here. Okay, so tell us about your Caliente leadership and then move into the new book and how it came about.
Okay, great. Well, as you mentioned, I live in Palm Springs, and most people know that caliente means hot in Spanish, but a second definition of caliente is passionate. So I'm passionate about leadership. And so it allows me, people ask me why caliente leadership, gives me my little elevator speech to talk about passionate. But also the land I live on is owned by the Agua Caliente Band of Indians. And so it's partly my tribute to our Native American landowners as well. So that's a little story behind the company. The book is called it's called Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. And as you mentioned, it's all about becoming a first responder rather than a first reactor.
Why don't you hold up the cover of the book?
Geez, you're a good man. Authors love to see their book on TV. So
there
it is.
You get it at Amazon, I assume.
It's on Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. And you see it's got the fiery brain and the calm brain. And that's what it's really about, is to make better decisions. We need to get our brain under control, not get emotionally hijacked. And then we can do better thinking. And once we do better thinking and look at more options, rather than just one or two, then we make better decisions and we get better outcomes.
I made a couple of notes here. You're trying to have people, CEOs, be more mindful.
Well, it's very important. I love your phrase, the new now. I mean, everyone's under more stress. And as people go back into the workplace, they're going to be full of anxiety, full of stress, full of nervousness, full of uncertainty. And so leaders need to become more present. And one of the things that happens when we get stressed or emotionally hijacked, our brain looks for what we call binary decisions, one or two, A or B, black or white, yes or no. Well, often those are not the best decisions. And so what we need to do is calm ourselves down, and as leaders, not make snap decisions, not be pressured in decisions, slow down, ask better questions, and then reflect, and then pick a more optimal decision.
Yeah, just adjusting my lights here a little bit. Tell me, what are the roadblocks to that?
The roadblocks to becoming a mindful leader?
Yeah, well, everybody thinks, well, I wouldn't say everybody, but I would think that some CEOs are alpha males or alpha females. And what are you going to tell me that I don't already know, that kind of thing?
And that's very true. And I think that's part of the problem. And it's the old style leadership, the command and control style leadership, or the attitude that I'm the leader, so I have to know everything. Humility in leadership is quite important in today's world, and having the attitude of, I don't have all the answers. I can't have all the answers, whether I'm a CEO, whether I'm a team leader, a supervisor, or a department head. And so we have to ask better questions, and we have to make more optimal decisions, because what happens if we don't, down the road, we have to course correct. And things aren't going the way we planned, so we have to stop, we have to waste time, pause, and course correct and try and get back on track again. And that's why productivity is not as high as it could be in the workplace.
So with CEOs becoming first responders, quote unquote, as people go back to work or expand from work from home, and it gets better or it blows up, because some people are stressing out, boy, this work from home thing doesn't work for a lot of people. And it does for others. It works for me. but I'm sure it doesn't for those who are not necessarily command and control, but the whole idea is to have staff around and accessible for brainstorming or for last minute follow up.
Absolutely, and it's not just having staff around, it's having your colleagues around, it's having your peers. I think brainstorming is a good example. I don't think people really know how to brainstorm on a Zoom call or a Skype call. When you're in a meeting room, you can get everyone involved. When you have a conference call of 8 people, you can always have 1 or 2 people quietly not involved. You don't get their inputs, and you don't get the options that you need to make an optimal decision.
Yeah. So, how do you get good leaders to become great leaders?
I love that question. That's my whole philosophy, my whole motto is that's exactly what I do. It's a series of things. One, most leaders focus only on getting results, and that's important. There's no doubt about that. So I work with leaders and say, okay, focus on results, but also how do you focus on people, leading people? How do you focus on leading people development? And the one area that no one really talks about and that I really focus on, how do you focus on leading yourself? How do you focus on your own self-development? Yeah, see, absolutely. How do you motivate yourself? Because if you're not motivated, your staff won't be motivated. If you're not developing yourself, your staff won't see the need to develop. And if you don't develop yourself, you're going to get stuck. It's kind of the old Peter principle from the 1970s.
So a lot of that has to do with finding ways to reinvent or rethink.
It does, and the phrase I'm using today, and I think you might like that, is because you talk about the work at home and everything. A disrupted workforce requires disrupted thinking to move forward, and this is what we need. We need disrupted thinking. We need leaders to stop, pause, make better decisions. Can I give you a little story to illustrate this?
Yes.
Okay, so back in December, I was teaching a classroom in Fort Worth. Normally, we only allow 24 people in it because it's highly interactive. We had 28 people sign up. I said, okay, I can handle that. At 8:05, the class starts at 8. At 8:05, I had 37 people in the room. And we're moving tables around, moving chairs around. And at noon, the lady who owns the program for her company called me and said, what's going on? Where do these people come from? I said, I don't know. They're your staff. They all showed up. They all said they're registered. And she says, well, send them home. If they're not on my list, send them home. So she was in a stress mode, binary, 1 or 2, send them home or keep them. And I said, whoa, slow down, wait a second. Of these 9 people, 3 had flown in from Colorado, 1 had flown in from Baton Rouge, 2 had driven from Oklahoma to Fort Worth, 1 had driven from Kansas to Fort Worth. It's a 4-day program, by the way. Do you really want to send them home halfway through day 1? They've got hotel reservations, they've interrupted their schedules, they've made arrangements with their families. And so when I got her to pause and reflect, and I said, look, I can handle the 38. I can make some changes. It was a more optimal decision for the company to go forward. And fortunately, as luck would have it, this was December, that company has canceled all classroom training for this year. So if those 9 people didn't stay, they would not be trained until 2021. And
So
that's what I'm talking about.
Has there been follow-up? Are they productive now in this new crazy situation?
I think some are. I mean, as you say, not everyone's going to adjust. I mean, I think one of the things we have to do is start teaching people virtually how to be more mindful leaders, how to be able to work with colleagues remotely. One of the things with the people I'm coaching right now is, again, leaders are so focused on results. I'm getting everyone I coach, when they call around every few days to their team members, first question to ask, how's your family? How's things at home? How's the family handling the lockdown? Then talk about business and talk about, are your children doing remote education? What time are they in classroom remotely? Should we schedule our calls at a better time? Which parent is helping the children do those remote classes? You've got to focus on the people first. Your results will come later.
Yeah, that's really good. That's humanistic.
Thank you.
Rather than hard driving and productivity. So talk to me about productivity today in this new environment.
Well, I think it's going to take a while to get productivity back. As I said, I think people are going to come back into the workplace nervous, full of anxiety, full of uncertainty, not knowing what the quote new normal really means, not knowing how to operate. how do you do social distancing in a workplace when you have to, collaborate with colleagues. And I think the other thing leaders have to understand when we come back, the prolonged stress that we're all going through with the lockdowns or shelter in place, whatever you want to call it, prolonged stress impacts the part of the brain that controls our ability to react. And this is why right now, as people are locked down, we're seeing higher levels of alcohol abuse. We're seeing binge eating at home. We're seeing more family domestic abuse, unfortunately. People are going to bring this with them back into the workplace. And so again, leaders need to pause and keep monitoring the emotional status of their people, not just the rational status of their people. And as they do that, you'll get productivity will come back slowly but surely.
So do you tell this to CHROs as well as CEOs? Because it seems like it's the HR leader that's really going to have this responsibility.
I do. I'm writing a lot of articles on LinkedIn these days, promoting these ideas, circulating these ideas. I've got, I think, 2,500 followers on LinkedIn, and a lot of them are CROs and what we call CLOs, Chief Learning Officers. So yeah, I'm trying to spread that message. Most importantly, I've got a one-day workshop about making better decisions and how to go from mindful as 2 words to mindful leader. And I'm trying to promote that and get organizations to either do that as a team building exercise for their leaders, a rebonding exercise when they return to the workplace, or I can do it virtually. And I've broken into 4 90-minute segments. And so I'm starting to work with some organizations now virtually to set them up to return to the workplace and be more productive when they get back.
Yeah. So are you dealing more with men or women?
Depends on the industry, quite frankly. I do a lot of work in the oil and gas industry, and that's still fairly male dominated, particularly at the operational level. At the corporate level of oil and gas, you have a great number of women. In the research part of oil and gas, you've got a great number of women who are chemical scientists, chemical researchers. In the smaller businesses, it's kind of almost not quite 50-50, but getting pretty close in terms of the gender mix.
Yeah. And so what about dealing today with communication skills, almost media training, if you will? In other words, how to perfect an elevator pitch. In other words, how to perfect what you really want to say in as few words as possible,
yeah.
and just have, create the atmosphere for a dialogue rather than command and control.
I totally agree. I think communication as a leader is one of the most important skills, and it's unfortunately one that people aren't necessarily trained in doing. My philosophy is when it comes to communications, we all have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And the more we listen to talk, if we did in that ratio, listen twice as much as we talk, we'd be better leaders. We'd listen to our people. We'd understand really not just what they're saying, but what they're not saying. And is it what they're telling us is what they think we want to hear? Or what is it they really believe? What is it they really see? What is it that they really think could be done, particularly people who are at the front line execution of things, how things could be executed better than what the leaders think could be executed. So listening skills is the one skill I focus on the most when it comes to communications.
So let's get into your book, if you don't mind. If you look at your table of contents, for instance, pick out a chapter that you love. And I know it'd be hard, but what's the title, and why do you think this one is particularly important?
Well, it's like asking which kid you love the most. The title again is Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. And I like the title and the introduction, the way I set the book up for 2 reasons. One, I explain that the first thing we have to do, the first decision we have to make is not to get emotionally hijacked. like the lady in the Fort Worth story. She was emotionally hijacked, and so she was not going to make an optimal decision. So the first decision is not to get emotionally hijacked. People often tell me, shouldn't the title be Better Thinking, then Better Decisions, then Better Outcomes? I said, no, the first decision, don't get emotionally hijacked. Get your stress under control. Second thing I like about this chapter, I explain that the prefrontal cortex, the rational center of our brain, it takes approximately 8 seconds once you make that decision not to get emotionally hijacked. It takes about 8 seconds to take over from the amygdala, which is at the back of our brain, which is the emotional control center. So I don't know about you, but I was taught as a child, Ed, when you get angry, Stephen, you can't throw things. You can't hit another child. When you get angry, count to 10. Well, counting to 10 is roughly 8 seconds, and scientists can prove that that 8 seconds is how we get ourselves under control. And the third part I've really loved, and when I did the research, this shocked me. Because again, I was taught as a high school, as a teenager in biology class or something, that our brain stops growing around age 25. Well, that was never true, but scientists can now prove that it's not true. Our brain continues to grow well into our 70s. Probably into our 80s or 90s. There's just not enough 80, 90-year-olds to test. But that's what's really important. So we need to take care of our brain starting in our 30s and our 40s. Alzheimer's, dementia is not an old person's disease. It's a lifestyle disease. Some doctors refer to Alzheimer's now as diabetes type 3. Because it's our lifestyle. It's being overweight. It's being inactive. It's having high blood pressure, allowing stress. This in our 30s and 40s and our 50s is what increases our risk for dementia and Alzheimer in our 60s and 70s. So that's my favorite chapter, simply because I think those are 3 very important messages, and of course the rest of the book explains why those messages are so important.
Thank you. So from your experience, which of the chapters, it's probably more than one, but which of the chapters are more liked or enjoyed or commented on by women leaders?
The chapter about mindful techniques at work, because people think mindfulness, first of all, to be mindful has nothing to do with meditation. You don't have to take yoga up. You don't have to go on a 10-day retreat. But to be mindful in the workplace, and people don't realize how easy it is to become mindful in the workplace. And so I've got, I think, 20 or 25 little tips on how to become mindful in the workplace. And one of them is just breathing. And you can breathe and hold it and hold the exhale. And this is called box breathing. It's what the Navy SEALs do. They do it for 5 minutes before they go into a stressful situation. And I don't know anybody in the workplace who has a more stressful job than a Navy SEAL. So the fact that you can do this in the workplace amazes people. And that's the one I get comments on the most.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that information. Okay, so in your next live session, whenever that will be, when do you think that will happen? Sometime before Christmas?
The next live classroom session, well, I have one scheduled in September, one in November. I'll have to wait and see how things shake out. I'm not counting on a whole bunch of live classroom sessions for the remainder of the year, quite frankly. I'm developing a series of online training videos for leaders, an 8-part series that I'll start marketing in July. And I do think, we're going to change. There's going to be a lot more online type education, type training, coaching, at least for the next 18 to 24 months. And the reason I believe this is that organizations, they can't wait 18 to 24 months to keep training their people. They've got to continue. So perhaps the one silver lining in this pandemic is that businesses and organizations have been forced to open their eyes and look at new ways of doing things. I mean, classroom training has been the status quo. Virtual online training is not an evolution, but it's really a pivot. It's really a revolution in how professional training can be done cost effectively. And as I said earlier, disrupted workplace requires disrupted thinking. And I think this is going to, certainly for the next 18 to 24 months, is going to be the large majority of how training will take place.
Let me ask just an off-the-wall question here, but just being creative for a moment. If you could, or if you had a teenager with you who's into technology and gaming, Xbox kind of gaming.
Right.
How could we, or you, how could you gamify what you just said? Yeah, in other words, how to make the training interactive or more engagement rather than me just sitting and listening.
Yeah.
What buttons can I push on my keyboard here that you would see, and then we could have a real time dialogue.
Yeah.
In other words, training becomes highly interactive rather than I thou. It becomes a game.
There's two ways. I'm not sure about gaming it at the moment, but the two methodologies are the training videos I'm doing so that people can access them remotely. I give them I think it's about an 80-page workbook. And so there's places in the videos where I say, pause. Here are the questions, go to your workbook, work on this. So for instance, when I'm talking about feedback, I've gone through the process of feedback. And then in the workbook, pause, plan a feedback with one of your employees, then come back, and then we'll talk about it. I let them email me things like their SMART goals. Email me your SMART goals. Within 48 hours, I'll review those and get back to you. On the live sessions, there's many ways of being interactive, Ed. There's in certain platforms, particularly Adobe, you can have what you call breakout rooms. I do some virtual training right now for a UK pharmaceutical company. And so we spend about 10 or 15 minutes beginning introducing a topic, and then I send them into breakout rooms of either 2 or 4 people, and they have to discuss something for 15 or 20 minutes. And I pop in, I listen to them, I add some comments, I answer their questions, and after 20 minutes, they all come back to the main room, and then we share what they talked about. They share what they learned. They share what their light bulb moments are. At other times, we put what's called a whiteboard on the screen, and we ask them to, I'll throw out a question like, what do you think the most important thing about feedback is? And then they can type in their comments on a whiteboard, just like a whiteboard in a room, and everyone can see all the comments. And it's anonymous. They don't know who made the comment. So
good.
it's not difficult to make live sessions interactive. The pre-recorded sessions, the best way I've found is to give them a good workbook, make them stop and have them get into their workbook, and then come back and we move on to it.
So what's your experience when you ask a difficult question and somebody doesn't want to answer it?
One of the best things that happened to me in my life is I lived in Asia for 21 years, and that cultural communicating with Asians, and Asians tend to be very reserved, and particularly in public settings. And so I've learned a couple of techniques. I've learned a little bit of self-deprecating humor, for instance. That kind of breaks down the barriers. I tell them it's okay. I tell them I don't have all the answers. If somebody doesn't have the answer, I move on quickly, or I'll ask a follow-up, a prompt. I'll kind of, as they say in the TV shows, lead the witness, kind of draw them out. But it's okay if you create a safe environment, and that you have to do that in the the first couple of training sessions. These one for the UK company is 5 sessions over 9 weeks. Create that safe environment. You can draw people out, and it's quite okay. The other thing is you ask a more general question and get everyone to type into the chat box, and then you start commenting. Hey, Ed, that's a really good question, or that's a really good comment. And when people are putting in their answers like that in the chat box, and I can see what it is, I'll go through and say, Ed, I like what you said. I'm going to ask you to unmute in a minute, and I'd like you to elaborate on that. So you give them 30, 40 seconds to think about it, and then I'll go to somebody else. Joanna, I also would you prepare to unmute yourself, and I'd like you to talk a little bit more about your point and give us an example if you could. And that gives them time so they're not cold. Yeah. So
yeah, that's the engagement technique.
It is.
Yeah.
And so
people will remember that.
Oh yeah. And then they learn from each other. I mean, the difference between being a trainer and a facilitator, and I'm a facilitator. The trainer comes in as a subject matter expert and says, do. I come in as a facilitator and say, here's some ideas, here's some concepts. What do you think? What do you guys think? And Ed just said something. What do you guys think about what Ed said? And now we get a dialogue going. And in the classroom, sometimes I get dialogues going 8-10 minutes. I just feel like I'm an orchestra conductor. Okay, over there. Okay, you had your hand raised. What do you think? And I'm just getting everyone to contribute. They learn a lot. That's how adults learn. Adults don't learn the way children learn in the classroom.
So I wanted to ask you now, as we come to a near close here, and we still have a few minutes, but younger people in your classes or in your reach, they learn differently, don't they?
They do, and that's why I think the video. I mean, they quite frankly like the videos. They like to learn at their own pace, but they also have different needs, different questions. And so, actually, I've put this in one of the training videos. I'm talking about today's challenging times. One of the challenging times we have is the Me Too environment. I get a lot of young men, 28, 30 years old, first time supervisor role. They'll come up to me at lunch or during break and say, Stephen, I need to ask you a personal question. I said, yeah, well, how can I help you? And they said, look, when I joined this company 6 years ago, I would travel with my manager and we'd go to call on clients. And the best training I got, the best mentoring I got was we'd go in the hotel bar in the evening and have a couple of drinks. And we'd go to a sports bar and he would teach me a lot. I don't feel comfortable. My people reporting to me. I've got a woman reporting to me. I don't feel, when I travel with her, I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't even want to stay in the same hotel as my female colleague. I don't want to, and I know I'm cheating her out of some mentoring I could be giving her. So I talk about, well, you don't have to go to a bar. You can go to Starbucks. Look, if you're in a hotel, first of all, there should be some corporate guidelines. So follow your corporate guidelines. If they're not, my best practices are, if you're in a hotel, make sure you're not in the same floor she's on. And vice versa, if it's female, male. So just whatever the other gender is. If you're finishing going up in the elevator, let her go first. You make an excuse to stay in the lobby for a few minutes, and then you go up separately. Go to dinner, make sure it's a public place. Like I said, Starbucks is better than a bar if you want to do that. Invite customers or other people around, but you have a responsibility. Don't cheat her out of the mentoring that it's your responsibility to give her. Find a way of doing it. And but this is endemic in many organizations. I get high-tech organizations, oil and gas organization, mining organizations. There's this fear of young men of how to be one-on-one with their female associates.
So thank you very much for this deep dive. Are you working on your next book? Will it be another version of Better Decisions?
Absolutely. I mean, you're like my straight man here, Ed. I have a book. I'm going to get it out by the middle of June, and it excerpts a lot from the Better Decisions book, but it only focuses on how stress and anxiety impacts decision making. So I've taken all the brain health stuff out, all the stuff about leadership out. This is going to be a book aimed at everybody, and just about how stress and anxiety impacts decision making. And it should be out on Amazon by the middle of June in both paperback and Kindle.
Boy, push them out.
Well, look, we're in this quarantine situation. My attitude is very simple. If you're not developing yourself, or if you're not working on strategic projects that you're passionate about, it's not because you have a lack of time. It's because you have a lack of commitment or you have a lack of passion. So I'm encouraging everybody, whether you want to write a book or, learn a new instrument or learn a new skill, you should not be binge watching on Netflix all the time. I mean, do it occasionally, but use this downtime to better yourself. And so in my case, I'm passionate about writing, and that'll be book number 21.
So that is very cool. So I'm doing the same thing. Since about March 15, I've reinvented my business because most of our revenue had for years been from live meetings, ticket sales, sponsorships. And I kept putting off getting into video. I do have a series with Paul that we started in 2010 of talk shows, podcasts. We call it globalradiotalkshow.com. And it's very popular still. We're doing that now. But we've done half a dozen of these video shows just in the last 6 or 7 weeks. And I'm finding it exciting, and also possibility of monetizing through sponsorships. Can't sell tickets to this, but we can find sponsors who want their logo connected with what I'm doing. And so I've yet to do that, but I'm working on it.
Great.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, your podcast is brilliant, and I've enjoyed it, and
Yeah,
I'm
thank
sure you'll
you.
be very successful with the TV show. And
Yeah.
you'll find sponsors once people are, a better decision would be to sponsor your program.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, CalienteLeadership.com. Again, Caliente, the Spanish word CALIENTE, leadership.com. Email address is very simple, Stephen@CalienteLeadership.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. So pretty visible. But more importantly, you can find my books on Amazon, and that's the most important place. That's the best place to start.
Well, you're a very lively guest and very informative in a brief way like this. And I invite you to come back and let's do this again when your new book comes out and you have time.
I will be very happy to do so, Ed, and I hope you enjoy that wonderful weather in San Diego. As we hit triple digits today in Palm Springs, I'm very envious of your oceanside breezes right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, the sun is just breaking through the May gray layer of fog,
Okay.
and so we're going to go out for a walk somewhere. I think we're going to go to the
Great.
beach again. We've been doing it every day. All
Excellent.
right, take care.
That's
And
important. Thank you very
Stephen
much, Ed.
Howard. We'll meet in person someday, somewhere.
We will.
Great.
We will
Thank
on
you.
the beach. Cheers.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ed. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.